In any event, I'm going to move on and talk about the global industry from a demand standpoint. Growth is still concentrated in developing economies. Slowdown with the BRICS party, as Nariman mentioned, but certainly it's still a very important area. The developing world is where demand is concentrated from a chemicals perspective. But I'd say more recently, and I'll touch on this later, onshoring is a new dynamic for us. Certainly here we're seeing that happen. From a supply standpoint, the industry is adapting to the new energy framework. I would say the dislocations that we have in infrastructure not being built are putting some interesting differentials in the market that may not be there long term. But certainly we're seeing capacity additions accelerate around that new energy framework. Disadvantaged plants are disappearing, or certainly have been announced to do that. From an earnings standpoint, we have kind of a bipolar world. We've got, on the one hand, if you've got advantaged feedstocks, it's the best of times. On the other hand, in some places of the world, and certainly in some value chains, it's quite a difficult place to be, and the earnings are less than robust. But overall, the industry continues to evolve into what is this new world order, as it always adjusts to the market forces and the frameworks that are taking place. So today I'm going to talk about three different areas. We're going to look at near-term outlook, production, and profits. We'll look at the energy-induced supply-side dynamics and some of the things that we're seeing in the market and some of our analysis. And then we'll take a look at the end sector demand drivers and trends as we get going on to towards the end of the presentation. But first, from a near-term outlook and production. In 2012, and just to set this up a little bit, as the first speaker here, we have to try and aggregate all of the chemicals together. So we have a basic chemicals and plastics total that represents the accumulation of a number of different chemical and plastic molecules. The total demand in 2012 was about 693 million tons. You may remember last year we showed a growth, same chart, growth in 2012 to 2013 was about 2.7%. So we really didn't have a very good year. In 2013, we improved somewhat. We grew about 3.8%, about 1.25 times global GDP, slightly below both the GDP elasticity and the historical average that we saw for chemicals as a total. If we look at this from an overall standpoint, here you can see how that demand kind of stacks up. In North America, really not a huge increase in incremental demand for these chemicals. We've really not got a lot of downstream production to be able to absorb this capacity. Most of it's going into the export market. In Europe, consistent with what Nariman was talking about with respect to the economy, we saw some shrinkage. The rest of the demand was concentrated primarily in China, as it has been for quite some time, with about 50% of the total global demand for chemicals growing in China, and then split around the developing areas of Asia Pacific, in the Middle East, and then elsewhere around the world. If we look at the capacity side or the supply side of the equation, this is going to go now from 2010 through to 2020. We had about 910 million tons of total global capacity that we started in 2010. As we look forward into 2020, we expect to grow about 400 million tons or so of global capacity based on what we're seeing in terms of announcements that we've got in our system. That's split up a little bit differently than the demand is, because we're really now looking at where are the advantaged supply sources from an energy standpoint. North America, a significant amount of capacity additions. West Europe, we're continuing to expect additional rationalization of capacity as the framework adjusts to new trade patterns. Significant capacity growth in China. And we'll talk a bit about that in Paul Pong's speech this afternoon. Asia Pacific also adding capacity in other locations, much of this integrated in with refining capacity. The Middle East, of course, continues to add significant amounts of capacity, still quite a bit of advantaged feedstock. The nature of that is changing, and I'm sure you'll hear that from Warren, and then the rest of it distributed. So a little more distributed platform and supply profile than we had on the demand side. From an earnings standpoint, this is the EBIT for the entirety of the industry, kind of aggregated for those molecules, if you will, going back to 1985. So you see the global cyclic nature of the chemicals industry, ups and downs. We came out of 2009 kind of lackluster after the global economic crisis. we recovered earnings fairly well in 2013, and for our viewpoint going forward, the global utilization rates of basic chemicals and plastics is expected to improve in 2014 marginally over 2013, and the cycle will be extended out through to 2018. However, the nature of this will change, as I'll talk about in a moment. Here we see on an individual basis the West European EBIT chart for the same structure, and you can see it follows the cycle pretty well. Tracks fairly well in terms of the peaks and valleys, a little bit below the global average, you'll notice as we go forward. From an Asia-Pacific standpoint, higher highs, lower lows, and you can see as we go forward we're a little more pessimistic on the recovery in Asia-Pacific on an overall margin basis for the industry. The real changing dynamic here comes as we look at North America. Here you can see the cyclic nature. We didn't have the highs that we have in Asia-Pacific, but tracked fairly well with the other regions globally. As we go forward, we don't see the volatility in the cycle, and certainly the upcycle will be much higher than it has been in the past, and this is primarily due to the expectation of the differential between oil and gas liquids and what's happening with the margins in those fundamental building blocks. So, from an overall summary of this point of the presentation, 2013 demand was below trend line, or demand growth was below trend line, but it did accelerate through the year, and we improved relative to 2012, and we're expecting improvements still as we go into 2014. North America, the Middle East, and China are going to lead the world forward with respect to supply additions, with new investment in the industry. And then from a margin standpoint, near-term margins are expected to improve from our perspective for many value chains. I certainly can't say that about all of them because there's a number, as you'll hear over the next couple of days, that are particular nuance in different parts of their cycle from a supply-demand standpoint. But importantly, we see reduced cyclicality for the advantaged producer.